Hey everyone, welcome to the Darshan Talks podcast. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. So as you know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, and obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. This is the live stream for you. I have to specify this is not legal advice. I am a lawyer. I'm also a pharmacist, and it's not clinical advice. And our expert today is an expert in customer retention and customer experience, and she's not providing that advice either. So I do these video live streams because they're a lot of fun. I find myself learning something new every single time. But it'd be nice to know if someone's actually listening. And if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. If you want to find me, you can always find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Our guest today is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Lithero. And I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but we're going to ask for that in about 3 seconds. So if you are in the MLR space, if you are in advertising, if you're in promotion, if you are in an MSL or in medical affairs, and you're trying to figure out, are our documents sort of being appropriately reviewed, and will someone guide us through that process? You probably want to listen in, because this is going to talk about how that experience is managed, at least at a software company like Lithero, as I say it, but apparently that could be completely wrong. Our guest today is, like I said, the Vice President of Customer Experience at Lithero. Her name's Rachel Kane. Thank you so much for being here, Rachel. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, so let's start with the basics. So we talk about customer experience. That's your role. When do you actually, and you're the vice president, so my first question is, do you report directly to the president, or is this always a role that is so connected directly to top leadership, or do you report through someone else?
I report directly to our CEO, Niren Burke. Mm-hmm. Our company is Lithero, to answer your question before. And Lithero is a startup emerged out of Philadelphia. And I do report directly to Niren. Typically at larger organizations, there's a customer experience group or a COE, Center of Excellence of Customer Experience. Sometimes there's a chief experience officer. Companies are making investments nowadays in really hiring a C-suite executive to lead this initiative and program across their organization. And oftentimes it's somebody from an industry that they're not in, especially in pharma. Huh. So they're taking, somebody that led customer experience at Nike, right, and pulling him over to be, designing a new experience management program at Merck or something like that.
Why like that? Why is that?
I think there's a lot to learn across industry. At Lithero, especially, we're trying to look at our customers' experience. Our customers are the pharma companies that are looking to really speed up their MLR process without sacrificing accuracy, right? And how do you leverage AI to do that? Our product is an AI platform to do that. And so it's really technological and advanced and innovative for serving the pharma industry, which has really predominantly been slower to change and takes a long time to be innovative and think differently and take risk a little bit and be comfortable with the uncomfortable of change. And that's a challenge, but the pharma industry knows that they need to do it, and they need to do that now, and they need to invest not only in AI or different technologies, but actually measure if it's working, right? Are they investing in it right? And so for them to do that, they found that, other industries already did it. They've done it for years successfully. They've had lessons learned on how to improve their customers' experience through leveraging AI or different technologies and innovation. They've led big change and transformations. Why not pull those people over, create a chief experience officer position or something like that, or a COE, and let's take those best practices and learnings from other industries and apply them to life sciences.
So it's interesting. The timing of our conversation is really interesting to me, because today's news, I believe, was that Apple is taking a step back. Now, I'm not saying that they are stepping away from, at least it wasn't clear from what I read if they were stepping away from it, but they're taking a step back from health. And the question is, I mean, when you think of the customer experience, Apple is who you think of. So if Apple's taking a step back, what does that mean for the customer experience or the patient experience in general? Does it mean that healthcare, and here's the general sort of feedback when I read about it, was basically healthcare is problematic. Healthcare is reticent to change. They do not want to change. And I'm using pharma as part of healthcare, obviously, but it seems like the concept seemed to resonate exactly with what you just said. So I guess my question for you, coming from that customer retention, customer experience perspective, is Apple a harbinger? Is that the right word? Harbinger of something that might be coming, and how does a Lithero pivot away from what Apple's doing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that they probably made that decision based on data, right? They're collecting input from their users, from their customers very frequently, and they're learning from it and acting on it quickly in an agile way. And they're probably testing something new. And if they find out that, you know what, that was the bad decision to back away from healthcare, I bet you in 2 months from now or the next quarter, they may make an announcement that they're coming out with a brand new app to measure more health metrics or wellness about sleep. So you never know. I think it's very data driven. I think they do a great job of keeping a pulse on what their customers want and how they're using their products, what they're using it for, how helpful it's really being. And maybe the customer needs have shifted a little bit and they're not using Apple products for healthcare reasons anymore. They're maybe using it for something else. And there's an opportunity there to invest elsewhere for Apple. But for Lithero, we are actually in the process, and my role is accountable for doing that, is to really figure out how are we measuring that data from our customers? How are we collecting input from our customers? How are we turning that into insight to make decisions going forward about enhancements we roll out to the product or new products altogether that we want to create, new AI, solutions. So it's very applicable to us. But I think I read something today, really interesting, from Stephen Chapman. He's the CEO of Natera. I don't know if you've heard of them, but Natera is a genetics testing, blood testing company. And they're actually very close to me. I have 3 children and my youngest was born last year. I was pregnant all through the pandemic. And it was really nerve-wracking because when I found out I was pregnant, we weren't shut down yet, but I was too early to really tell anybody. Nobody knew. And then all of a sudden March happened and we were all stuck in our houses and nobody knew I was pregnant, but I had to get that 12-week test. As mothers may know, at around 8 to 12 weeks, you have a test, right, to understand if there's any genetic disorders that your child is facing. And usually you go into a doctor's office for it or hospital for it. And I couldn't. And I was very nervous. How am I going to get this test done to make sure everything's healthy when I'm stuck in my house and no one's allowed in hospitals because the pandemic just started? Natera just started offering mobile blood testing. And so the pandemic accelerated what they were already trying to do for their customers to improve the experience. And mobile blood drawing was one of those initiatives they had launched, which was extremely timely for me. And the portal. So the portal they created for customers to log in immediately as soon as their test was done. They can go on and, it takes maybe a week, but every single day, if you're an expecting mother, you're looking at your portal every day. You're like, maybe the results will come in earlier. I just want to make sure everything's healthy. That portal is clear, user-friendly, intuitive. It's so up to date, very quick and easy. And if I had a question, there was one-on-one support with an individual. And I actually knew my Natera rep who worked with my doctor at my doctor's office so that I had her phone number about billing questions. The whole end-to-end experience was phenomenal. And I think Steve Chapman said it best recently. He said, at Natera, we focus on having highly accurate testing, right? Which is number one, having a product that works. Like at Lithero, we have an AI that works, but also having an amazing customer experience. And he said, we tried to upend that dynamic and make Natera experience more like that of a tech company. He said, we now offer the mobile blood draw, the online sample tracking, and give patients the same day access to speak with a genetic counselor one-on-one. He said, this relentless focus on the customer has been one of the keys to our success. And that is something that my boss, Nyron, feels very strongly about. That's why he hired me and created this role and got, investment for it to really focus on it, because the product's in a great place, but people can go buy another AI solution to help speed up their MLR process and get promotional pieces out the door faster. But they'll maybe keep buying from Lithro if, the entire experience is wonderful and we keep evolving with our customers and we're listening to them and we put ourselves in their shoes.
So that's really interesting to me. The idea that, let me ask you a question. I'm visualizing Lithro as a young organization. How old is Lithro?
We're about 7 years old, 7, 8 years old.
Is that right?
Very young, very young.
Okay. So, but you've been around for 7 years. So AI was sort of really in its infancy. AI is still in its infancy. So my question for you is, they invested in you, invested in a person in your role pretty early on in the process at this point.
Yes.
So my question for you is, how do they measure your success?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And to your point, they've invested in 2 right now, right? Nyron is focusing on our product, keeping that product improved as much as possible, keep improving accuracy, keep learning, refining the AI. The product needs to be there, especially in the area that we're working in, right? Compliance is everything, quality is everything, speed. So number 1, focus on the product. Number 2, focus on the experience and customer feedback. What's working, what's not. Quick to test, quick to iterate, quick to collect feedback and input, not just from current users or customers, but also potential customers and users. A lot of my time is spent interviewing people that are potential customers and potential users. And I say that as 2 different things because some of them are buyers of the product, but they might not necessarily be users of the product. So we're talking to all of them to help inform our product team how to refine the tool and how to prioritize our sprints. And so those were the top 2 things that Nyron wants to focus on. It's proven data has shown that startups fail predominantly when they jump to sales too quickly. They invest in sales too quickly, where their product is not up to par fast enough. It's not where it needs to be. And the experience is not where it needs to be. So you quickly invest in a sales lead who goes out and gets all of these new customers and contracts sold. Great. But then there's so many bugs with the product, or you didn't have any processes in place for good customer service, how to quickly address bugs, how to communicate, report progress, even just have a good cadence of rapport with your customers. So that is something that Nyron did not want to happen with Lithro.
So that to me is interesting because you mentioned this important distinction, and I don't fully understand this, but explain the difference between customer experience, which is your what's the word for it? Your ambit, your jurisdiction. Yeah. As a lawyer, your jurisdiction. But how is that different from sales, and how is that different from customer retention? Are they necessarily the same thing? Like your VP reporting directly to your CEO, is there a different salesperson? Is there a different person in customer retention? How does that play itself out?
Sure. So retention does fall under me. And you asked me before, I didn't quite answer directly about how I'm measured. My success is measured. It is measured on retention and NPS. So
I'm sorry, what is NPS?
Net Promoter Score, how likely a customer is willing to recommend your product to somebody else.
And how do you measure that?
It's a little different with B2B versus B2C. There are many different ways to measure it. It's also not the only metric that's important. And you have to decide who you're measuring that with, like who are you asking that question to, who's that audience. So we have processes designed for all of that. There are tools and technologies out there to do that for you as well. But honestly, it's all about customer retention in my jurisdiction, and customer satisfaction and recurring, revenue coming in the door, of customers that are just so happy. They would just want to keep using our AI. They don't want it to shut off because they're relying on our product, and they enjoy working with us at every interaction point they have with Lithro. Sales is separately. When we build out our sales team, it will be totally separate. It will be under somebody else. Sales right now is under somebody else. I mean, Niren's big focus is on sales and BD. I definitely support him in that, but I'm not accountable for it. I'm not measured on it. Obviously, if the company's successful, then I'm going to be successful. So we're all, charging that direction, especially at a younger company where we all have influence there and are expected to help with BD and sales. But I actually think it's incredibly important to keep customer experience separate from sales for one big reason. We, as CX leaders, rely on the candid feedback from customers. And how can they be candid if you're also trying to sell them something? It needs to be separated. When I get on the phone with strangers that I've connected with on LinkedIn, or I've gotten warm introductions to that are all potential customers and users, but they never really met me before, they need to understand that I'm not getting on the phone with them to try to sell them something. I'm just getting their feedback. And all of a sudden, there's this comfort level. They open up. They say whatever they feel and think, whether it's, I agree or don't agree. It doesn't really matter. We have a nice conversation, and it's important to hear what they say. And same with the actual customers that have interacted with Lithro. They're interacting with Niren or our head of AI or something, and not with me along the way. But then and they didn't even interact with me when they were sold Lithro. But then when I am the person collecting feedback from them, they're able to open up. They give me feedback on individuals. They give me feedback on things that they expected to see and didn't get. And it's incredibly helpful to have that candid communication channel with your customers. And I just feel like if you're integrating sales and CX, you're not going to get that.
So talk to me a little bit about how your function interacts with sales then, because obviously you have a major impact on what the next release is going to include, and that's going to make their life easier. But I imagine sales is saying the same thing, that they're actually the ones trying to sell it, and they're getting pushback on ABC. So how is your feedback different materially from sales feedback, and how do you sort of merge them together to create that next release?
Well, some of the candid feedback I was able to receive was about the sales process. So it was things that they enjoyed seeing and experiencing during the initial pitch meeting. What worked in the pitch deck? What didn't work? What was too salesy? What made them feel liked? Like all the questions that we were asking them in that meeting, the real, genuine listening we did in those initial meetings. A lot of the feedback I get informs our sales process, and it informs even how our pilot process, to be honest. It used to be proof of concept. We changed that completely to pilot. You can pilot and use our AI for 60 days and experience it end to end and see if it makes an impact. See if you're enjoying it. See for yourself if it's as easy as we say it is. And then once you experience it and you can measure the impact it had for your business, you can make a decision. It's a lot better to do it that way than to have somebody do a conference room pilot or a POC, we found. And that was all from feedback we heard from customers.
So when you're planning this out, how do you, it's obviously the customer experience is sort of like what the industry is dealing with right now, which is patient engagement and patient centricity. It's sort of that behemoth that permeates every single thing you do. How do you choose which part of the elephant you start biting on?
I think you have to start at what matters most for your customer. So I had to also, and you have to do that in parallel with jumping in. So you have to kind of work with on the strategy and the tactics at the same time in parallel. So it's very easy, and probably most people's habits, to jump right into tactics and just start doing and want to be productive. And you can certainly do that and tackle the customer service approach, or tackle, the design, the UI, or the experience of the actual product, and not look at the end-to-end journey. But that's fine if you prioritize those tactics according to what's most important to your customer and most important to your business. And once you're starting to really execute those tactics, you can at the same time in parallel start talking about strategy, so you ensure that those tactics align back to, those key strategic value props that you don't want to lose sight of, that are your North Stars. And for us, we did that work early on, and we've defined 5 key strategic pillars for our customers' experience. It's all the things that matter most to them. It's all the things that we heard matters most to them. Stuff like quality, impact, speed, avoidance of FTA letters, So we had those pillars defined. We defined KPIs around those and how to measure them. And we defined how to constantly keep a pulse of them going forward with our customers. And then from there, we're able to incorporate, how we prioritize enhancements in our sprints for the product, and how we prioritize tactics in our plan to improve CX. And I think that's how you make your decision on where to start first.
So let's say I'm a new person in your role, right? And I've come in and I'm going, okay, they're paying me a nice chunk of change. I need to show impact immediately. My gut, if I was that person, would be, I need to start with the tactics, because I need to show a difference. I need to justify my salary. What I'm hearing you saying is, that's great, and you could go down that path, but you'll see more value going down some of the other, sort of having a larger, broader perspective as you dig in deep. Is that accurate? Did I hear you correctly, or was I?
That is 100% accurate. And one of the reasons why you do that is because there's too much guesswork in jumping right into the tactics. And next thing you know, you lost 2 months' time focusing on one of those tactics, and you realize, oh, I should have been investing in changing our sales process instead of changing the UI of the product, because that's actually going to drive more business in our early stage, right? That's what matters most, with the revenue and getting more customers. And so, you don't want to get too far down the path before you have those realizations. And that's why it's important to, speak with your leadership team, understand the vision of the company, where the company's at in its growth stage too, what are its objectives, what are some of your upcoming milestones, and also long-term milestones that you want to hit, and then come up with like an initial plan of a few tactics, like you said, to make impact early on, but then also have your plan for the longer term strategic work, because that is actually really important, and it's critical to be able to kind of validate your tactical plan against your strategy and assure that you're aligned as the head of the CX jurisdiction. You want to make sure you're aligned with your peers and your C-suite.
So here's the question. I mean, I have so many questions. I'm afraid of running out of time, but I'm going to ask the first question I have, which is, I'm going to change the question I was going to ask. One of the comments you said, and no one likes to mention this, but we all kind of know it's there, which is, you said one of the pillars is you don't get FDA letters. That's one of the goals that your clients potentially have. Is that fair?
That's not one of the pillars, but it's a subset of the pillar.
Okay, it's a subset of the pillar.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I asked
the quality pillar.
Sure. The reason I raised that is because we all know clients who are ad agencies.
Yep.
Who say that if I don't get a letter, I'm not doing my job. I'm not pushing that envelope as much as I should. How do you first of all address are your clients mostly ad agencies, or are they more the pharma companies or device?
So they're
companies?
more the pharma companies are buyers or customers, but an agency people will be users for sure, because the earlier on in the MLR process that you use Laura to screen your content of promotional material, the more value you'll see downstream. That's
Right.
the
So,
concept.
so if that's true, how do you deal with users and quite honestly also sales and marketing within the pharma company are going, we need to stand out. If that means a letter every so often, it means we're doing our job. It's not a good thing. It's just what it is. What is your take on that, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, number one, from experience, I spent some time as a management consultant, but also time in industry, both at Shire and at Merck in this exact space. So I've been the customer, and that's really important. I was the user. I managed these tight timelines. I was trying to get promotional material out the door through the MLR process to meet a critical deadline, like inviting HCPs to a live webcast that was going to happen on that date and time, no matter what. They were broadcasting that surgery, So it's really important to hit those timelines. And, if it means if it means you need to sacrifice or make some decisions on taking different levels of risk, that's something you have to make a decision on. And so Laura will screen content of those pieces and make recommendations to you. It will tell you that's a misleading claim. This is not, something to really, this message wasn't really used in prior approved materials. It will call that out, but at the end of the day, it's up to the business to decide if they're going to take that risk or not. So it's really just to speed up. It's to get those common issues out of the way, caught and fixed with your agency, the editorial stuff, some safety stuff, some claims references, incorrect references, a lot of those quality common issues, get those fixed out of the way so that you can spend more time in MLR, in those meetings, discussing exactly that. Is it worth it to take this message and take that level of risk to get an FDA letter? And we're going to be okay with that. And you should spend your entire meeting having that conversation versus the back and forth of rework of common issues. Let that be automated. Let an AI catch that and have you fix that. So that's the purpose. That's how to use our tool, Laura, but also, how we have conversations with agencies, sales, marketing people that see maybe getting a letter as like a good thing, like they're taking risk and being different, being innovative. But the other side of it is when I spent time at Shire, they got a letter. This was back in the early 2000s, and it was extremely disruptive. It took about 3 months to get pieces out of the field and impacted their sales, and it was very disruptive, and they never wanted to get another letter, and so you just have to measure the benefits versus the risk.
I have a series of other questions to ask, but we're well above time already. So I'd love to have you back. But before we go, we have a few questions to ask.
Great.
The first question, based on what we've discussed, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Rachel Kane. You can email me directly, rachel.kane@lithro.com, and check out our website, lithro.com. You can see the ROI of our tool, how it works, FAQs, all the information about our team as well.
Perfect. My next question for you, based on what we've discussed, what would you like to ask the audience?
I would like to ask the audience, what do you think's working and not working with customer experience teams out there? Like, what are you seeing that you think, that's really working? Or, I get asked that NPS question when I'm using Teams and I'm using Gusto, and I never even answer it. How could that be a good metric to use? Like, just the tactics and things that you're seeing customer experience teams do out there in the field, in the market. What do you enjoy, and what do you think's working really well, and what do you think's not really working well?
So I'll speak to it as a customer in general, not of Lithro, obviously, but as a customer. I feel like I don't know if what's working, what's not, because no one ever contacts me. So my response would be, well, that's not completely true. Maybe no one contacts me in the pharma space, but I think about really good experiences. Like I had a really great experience with Audible recently, and they went out of their way to make it right, which I appreciated a lot. And then we've all had our bad experiences, and we consider that as well. But I thought that the idea, the concept that stuck in my head was that if customer experience is done right, you don't notice it.
Yeah. Or I would actually challenge that. If customer experience is done right, you're going to have a memorable moment. So you're going to notice that, because you're going to think, wow, that they went above and beyond. Like Chewy.com, somebody I know, their dog passed away, and they had a package delivered to their house still, but their dog was passed away. You know what? Chewy delivered flowers to her house. I mean, how you're always going to order your stuff through Chewy. You know what I mean? Like anything like that, even the Natera experience. Like it was such a personal time in my life, and I felt so nervous and stressed out and anxious. And I loved the nurse that came, and I loved checking my stuff. Like it just was, I'm going to think about it, and that company name pops up and whatever, I'm going to be like, oh, they were so great.
See, I'm gonna re-challenge you, and I think this is a great conversation to have, because here's my re-challenge. I think bad experiences, you're absolutely gonna blame the company and say that's a bad customer experience. Good experiences, for the most part, I'm gonna, this is how life should be. You didn't make my life difficult, and I appreciate it, but that's how life should be. Now you are pointing out a couple of interesting experiences, where the flowers, for example, which is really above and beyond what you could expect from a company, and maybe I guess those experiences stick out, but I'd say that that's less than 5% of good customer experiences stick out like that. For me, I think if someone's willing, like, I'll give you a really good example of a customer experience that was terrible. I had a terrible experience with Airbnb. It took me forever to get them to see things that were reasonable, and to me, that back and forth was problematic. But that stuck out to me more than, say, a VRBO, which has which sort of works with you and sort of favors you a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I guess I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess I'm partially agreeing with you in terms of the impact. But
yeah, I think if you're not realizing anything, then it's meeting your expectations, and it's great. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
But especially when it's a competitive market, meeting expectations may not be enough.
That's fair. That's 100% fair. And also, you have to recognize sometimes that you are a diva. So I do recognize that sometimes I have unfair expectations, and therefore when a client meets them, or when a company meets them, I appreciate it, because I know I'm expecting more than I should. So it's expecting that as well. So the next question, if you are, what is something that you learned in the last month that you think people would be fascinated to learn about?
I've learned a lot about AI. I know it sounds like nerdy and cheesy, and like you're at an AI company, but the truth is I've been doing a lot of technology consulting in my career and different projects around technology, but I've never been this close to an AI technology. So I wasn't as familiar with the benchmarks, and it was very surprising to me to understand how even IBM Watson was underwhelming customers. Like they do such a great job saying AI can do everything. But the reality is, like, having an AI tool read and comprehend text to know like when a sentence ends and to accurately understand the text, benchmarks about 60% of accuracy of doing that. Like it's doing that about 60% of the time. If you get that over 80%, that's phenomenal. To get an AI to learn that amount, and act in that way. Statistics like that surprise me all the time in this role, and it just makes me excited. It makes me excited for what we're doing and how we can help.
Have you heard of Ray Kurzweil? Okay. Talk to your tech people and ask them about Ray Kurzweil. So Ray Kurzweil is the guy who predicted that in like 1996, a computer would beat a grandmaster at chess. And then he predicted that by 2010 or so, you'd have personal assistants that can help you digitally. So your Series of the world, if you will.
Yep.
he predicts that you'd have the first general AI, I believe. Sorry, the first specific AI, and I could get my timings wrong, but approximately like 2021, 2022. So a specific task an AI could perform. And then they're saying that 26 or so, you'll have a general AI. And then around 2030, a computer will be as smart as a human being. And then it's like something like 2050, a computer will be as smart as all human beings. So that's sort of, when you think about AI, you think about where it's taking us, that's going to be a really, really interesting piece to consider. So when you talk about how smart AI is right now, thinking about that curve, that exponential curve that we're walking into is going to be fascinating as we continue. So we'll see where that takes us. My last question to you, what is something that made you happy in the last week?
Well, I went on vacation last week, so I was really happy to be at the beach with my family.
Very, very cool. Did the baby enjoy the beach? Did the baby enjoy the beach?
She loves the beach.
Oh, wonderful.
Loves the ocean. Anything that has to do with water, she loves.
That is awesome. Well, Rachel, it was wonderful having you on. Again, people can reach you at rachel.kane@lithero.com. And you can always go to the website at lithero.com. And thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.